In this section, you will learn how to manage a recruitment process and why it's so important to get it right. Recruitment can make or break a business. Get it right and you will have a workforce who have the right skills and abilities to fill your needs. Get it wrong and you may suffer a big dip in productivity that can harm your business in the long term and take a long time to recover from. So clearly this is such an important element of all of our businesses. Employing the correct people at the very first stage we possibly can is so important. Making those incorrect decisions and employing the wrong people can actually have an adverse effect, not just the sense of a lost opportunity of not employing the right person, but employing the wrong person in the organization and into your organization can really have an adverse effect, and it can take a while to put things back and into the correct way. So it's so important to have a good strategy. It's so important to understand some key elements behind the process of recruitment. And in this section, we'll overview what that process looks like and what you need to consider. So what is recruitment? Recruitment is attracting and selecting individuals into a job role. Recruiting the right individuals is crucial for the organization who need people with the right skills and capabilities to deliver their goals. It's a critical activity, not just for the HR team, but also for line managers who are increasingly involved in the selection process. Everyone involved in recruitment must have the appropriate knowledge and skills to make effective and fair recruitment decisions. Now, more than ever, organizations need to take a strategic approach to recruitment, selection, and talent management. So the first place that we start with recruitment is defining the role that we're recruiting for. This is easier said than done. I've seen lots of small business owners feel that they are running out of time in their day-to-day. So their ultimate decision is to employ somebody new to free up some of their time without considering what role the candidate is actually filling. So the first and foremost thing that must be done before entering into the recruitment process is defining what that role is. So the job's purpose and what duties are involved, how and where the role should be carried out. Outputs are expected of the job holder and how it fits into the organizational structure. Now, the organizational structure is something that we'll talk about in a bit more detail within the human resources module. That's the next module, but it's important to define the role, understand the role that you're recruiting for, and looking back to our business strategy module, understanding when we're going to need to fill that role. So taking all of these elements into consideration, we're going to want to have a clear and defined role. We're going to want to predict when we're going to have to fill that role, and we're going to have to plan how it fits into the organization structure. Once we have defined a role, we're going to have to attract applicants to that role. And there are a number of ways of doing this, and one that is sometimes overlooked is the internal approach. Clearly there is an external way that we can attract applicants, and that's by placing job adverts, and we'll have a look at this. But one that's often overlooked is the internal resources that we have within our company at the moment. And number one, we can consider promoting within. So we have people that work for us within our organization now that may have the skill set to be promoted into senior positions within our company. Now, that's not to say that you should make the mistake of employing your best engineer or your best technician or best salesman into a managerial role, because those skill sets are very different to a manager's skill set. They're two different and entirely separate jobs. Your best engineer may be a terrible manager. Your worst engineer may be an excellent manager. So it's important to, again, understand the role before you try to promote within, and you have to understand the skill sets that are required of that role. But again, looking at the workforce that you have for you as it stands is an excellent way of filling a vacancy. And then another excellent strategy for attracting applicants is actually using something called an employee referral scheme. Now, we all know about referral schemes, and we probably consider employing a referral scheme to acquire new customers into our business. But the other side of business is recruiting good people to work for us into the business. That's as important as attracting customers, because it's two sides of the coin. It's sales and ultimately business operations. So having an employee referral scheme and paying employees to recommend or refer an applicant to your business is an excellent way of attracting some good applicants into your organization. And there is always going to be a cost associated to recruitment. Yeah, time costs or labor costs of your own time, having to put energy and effort into finding those applicants, listing job adverts, paying people's wages to sit in on interviews. So there's always an associated cost, and it can be a bit of a shortcut to just pay your employees to refer applicants to some open positions that you have. And you'll find a lot of the time that your employees' peers align with the way that your current employees think and the attitude that they have towards their work. So if you've had good recruitment processes up until now and you've employed good people, you can be sure to find other good people within your own employees' networks. It's an excellent way in terms of finding a shortcut to getting some of the best applicants. So use an employee referral scheme to your advantage and pay your employees to advertise open positions on your behalf. And then the more traditional way is by using external elements of attracting applicants. This is using job search sites. This is using social media, local newspapers and trade publications. A lot of people now will immediately go to the job search sites and list a free advert within the job sites, and that's a good way of getting a high volume of candidates. But sometimes you want to be a bit more specific, and depending on what role you're advertising for and the person specification that you're going to create for these roles, sometimes advertising in a local newspaper or trade publication is going to yield a better result and quality of applicant for you. So you need to consider all of these elements. There's also lots of other traditional ways that you can attract applicants, such as networking, such as placing a poster, which is a good tip, a poster within merchant suppliers. Again, if you're working a lot with merchant suppliers and building those relationships, asking them to place within a branch that you're moving into in an area, for example, to place a poster up on the wall and get the merchant suppliers to refer your business to similar tradesmen that are coming in. This is an excellent way of attracting applicants as well. So be sure to make use of these ways of attracting your applicants and be broad in your approach. You're not always going to find the best people by sticking to one source of inquiry, just as the same as you will need varying different lead source inquiries. You need to have different recruitment sources of inquiry. So use job search sites, use social media, local newspapers, trade publications, and a whole plethora of other traditional elements of attracting applicants in an external manner. So considering the recruitment process, it's always easy as the business leader to take absolute control of this and identify who needs to be employed and in what position they need to employ. But you do have to ask yourself, especially when your organization is growing, who else needs to be involved in these decisions? When recruiting, you do need to think about which senior managers may need to be involved in the recruitment process when employing somebody within their department, for example. So not only should you have a good and thorough knowledge of the role that you're recruiting for, you're going to want to have a good and thorough knowledge of who else around the structure within your organization needs to be involved with filling that role as well. So don't jump into it head first. You're going to want to have a good understanding of who within your business needs to provide feedback and needs to be involved within the entire process from start to finish as well. So when starting the recruitment process, we have some key considerations here. Firstly, skills. Does a candidate have the correct skills to be able to work within our organization? Do they have the right experience? You know, experience accounts for a lot of how people work within our industry and within the construction industry as a whole. It's important to be very, very experienced. Their employment history, you're going to want to identify what their employment history is like and what their track record is like. Make sure they're not jumping around from company to company too much, because that can be an indication that they're not fitting in with any organization that they're trying to work with. Make sure that their personality and their attitude is correct. So you want to have good people working for you within your organization. This should be a fundamental element of your decision making. You need to have excellent people with excellent attitudes and excellent personality representing you and your company. And then ultimately their availability. You need to consider that they're able to fill the roles that you have available at the time that you need them. So again, a lot of people work on a 1 month's notice if they're going to serve notice from where they are at the moment. You need to be able to plan that in and make sure that you're not trying to fill a vacancy that's has to be immediately filled now, whereas you have to wait a month for all of the best candidates. You need to be ahead of the game, ahead of the curve on this, and make sure that you're not missing out on the best candidates purely and simply through the fact that they're not available when you need them to be. Some other key considerations throughout the recruitment process is reputation and legal requirements. Recruitment and HR is an element of business that's heavily dictated by red tape and bureaucracy. So there is a lot of paperwork involved, a lot of legals and regulations that you need to be considering. So number one, reputation. Make sure that the process is fair and you act in an honourable manner throughout. Consider how you will reject certain candidates. You should be open and honest with every one of them at every stage, and do the decent thing and make sure that you are rejecting the candidates that aren't successful. And then from a legal requirements perspective, you need to consider the key areas of law affecting recruitment and selection, including discrimination, the right to work in the UK, criminal record checks and data protection. When recruiting staff, you should understand and keep up to date with their legal obligations, making sure your recruitment and selection procedures comply with the law. So finally, as a recap on the recruitment process as a whole, this is advertising the vacancy and understanding what the role that is vacant within your business is first, all the way through to talent management. So you're going to want to advertise that vacancy, you're going to want to consider those applicants and fill that role, and then manage their talent post recruitment. You want to make sure that you're involving the right people throughout this process. So make sure that any line managers or senior managers or anybody else that needs to be involved within the recruitment process is involved within the recruitment process and understands the strategy from the start to the finish. And you also want to make key considerations about your reputation as a company, about laws and regulations when it comes down to recruitment, and again, ultimately about the qualities and the attributes that your candidates are going to need to have in order to be able to fill that role successfully. So the recruitment process is very much a strategy that you need to have in place to fill those opening roles as and when they're coming open, and making sure that you're selecting candidates that have the correct availability to fit the role when it's open. Throughout the rest of this module, we will be going into some of these elements in a little bit more detail, i.e. the interview process, i.e. candidate selection. So the recruitment process as a whole is ultimately identifying the role, advertising the vacancy and filling the role, and then managing that talent post-interview.